Barton, thank you very much for that. Now, as mentioned, these games, the Tailteann Games, they're described as a curious mix of myth, odd sports and top stars. The Tailteann Games were an Irish version of the Olympics. Cyril White is an Olympic historian. He's going to tell us a bit about this great sporting occasion from the last century. Cyril, good morning. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm in very good form.
Am I pronouncing this correctly on Tailteann Games?
Yes, correctly, yes.
What exactly was it?
Well, it was an Irish Olympic Games, basically. But it came from the original Tailteann Games, which started, would you believe, in 1250 BC.
BC?
BC, yes. We're about 250 years older than the Olympics.
How does the world not know that fact? I mean, the Greeks are after dining out on it for years, invented the Olympics. It sounds like we were in before them.
We're very slow at publicising the good things in this country. We're very good, if I may say so, at publicising the bad things. But the good things we seem to keep somehow or other under wraps. And the Tailteann is a very good example of this.
So what was going on 3,000 years ago? What were they up to? Who came?
Well, it was a celebration, like the Greeks, Greek Olympic Games, it was a celebration of Queen Tailteann, who was the foster mother of Louis of the Long Arm, who afterwards became High King of Ireland. And he was very close to her. And when she died, he decided he'd put on a festival. Éineacht Tailteann is what it's called in Irish, of all kinds of things, not just sport, but cultural things as well, in her honour. And that went on for many, many years. It faded out round about the time of the Normans getting here.
That's 2,000 years.
Yes, indeed, yes. Now, it wasn't held every year. It was a bit spasmodic, whereas the Olympics were held every 4 years. That was the Olympic cycle.
And when it was still being held in the last one I can see mentioned as 1169 of the Rory O'Connor, was it still called the Tailteann Games?
Yes.
And still people were very clear in their minds.
Indeed. And they came to Tailteann, which is an area just outside Navan, in County Meath, which of course is the royal county.
Yeah.
And they celebrated it very similar to the way the Olympics were celebrated at Olympia in Greece.
It's amazing that we don't know more about it, may I say. It's a bit embarrassing that we don't know more about it.
Indeed.
But when we got 1922, the Free State,
yes,
it came back on the agenda. What was the idea then?
Well, the idea very basically was to bring Irish people, or people of Irish heritage, all together in a sporting, cultural and musical celebration. And that's exactly what the 24, 28 and 32 games were and did. And my father and grandfather actually took part in the musical aspect and won. So you're talking to the son of a Tailteann winner.
Wow. I'm honoured. I'm wondering though, how do you win a music competition?
You just play better than your opponents,
right, okay,
and the judges consider you to be better.
How do they advertise it? I presume they were trying to get a bit of publicity around the world for Ireland standing on its own 2 feet now.
And this was the way the government did it. It was government supported.
Yeah.
And they appointed people in different parts of the world, the United States, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Britain, of course, and Canada, and other places where there might be Irish communities. And the job of the representative was to get them to come to Dublin, Croke Park, for the Tailteann Games. Whatever way they wanted to express themselves, musically, culturally, literary, or, of course, big thing, sportingly.
Right.
And it was a great success.
And I'm wondering how they put it together, because with the Olympics now, you have 4 years of people trying to get to an Olympic standard. It's measured throughout the whole world. How did they manage to get some level of competition into it?
Well, the point was, like the original Olympics, there wasn't a standard. If you turned up and you were good enough, you took part.
Right.
And that happened in the Olympics too, until 1908, when you had to enter through your National Olympic Committee. But the other one was, if anybody was interested, just come and take part. And a lot did. But also, the man really responsible was a man by the name of J.J. Keane. That little is known about him. Yet he was the founder of the Olympic Council of Ireland. He founded the NACAI, and he was Ireland's first member of the International Olympic Committee. Would you believe proposed by Baron de Coubertin himself?
Oh my God.
And this man has been completely forgotten. And I my own particular view, and I've been involved in athletics now for over 60 years, and sport as well, but principally athletics. In my particular view, he was the greatest sports administrator this country ever had.
Wow.
And that would include Pádraig O'Keefe of the GAA, who actually thought very highly of J.J. Keane.
It seems that he and this event have slipped off the radar.
Absolutely.
What was it like when it actually... How long did it run for?
It ran for about just under 2 weeks, and it took part all over Dublin, but the major events took part in Croke Park. And the great event, and my father always talked about this, was the high jump between Larry Stanley, who is both the Irish and the British champion. He won the 3A championship at Stamford Bridge, would you believe? Chelsea's ground now. And Harold Osborne, who was the Olympic champion and world's record holder.
Right.
And the pair of them competed in the high jump, and it was a ding-dong battle until the very end. And the Olympic champion and world's record holder won by half an inch.
It's funny, we have watched the high jump in the house. I wonder, did our interest in it possibly originate in that contest between them?
Could well
it was
be.
one of the main things we'd always be, I don't want to say dragged in front of the telly, but there was a certain amount of coercion going on to be made watch this high jump. Which I wonder, what other events were going on?
Oh, all the other events. 100,
I see some strange ones that I wouldn't have expected.
400.
Billiards, handball.
Yes. Chess.
Chess?
Yes. Motor car racing. Swimming. In the zoo in the Phoenix Park.
Yeah.
I don't know whether they possibly got the sea lions to get out. We're having a bit of a...
This I found very fascinating. Was this actually Johnny Weissmuller?
Yes, when he was here. Yes.
He came to Dublin and he went swimming in the zoo.
That's right.
We'll have to revisit this.
Well, not with the animals. I hope.
Johnny Weissmuller became Tarzan, didn't he?
That's right, afterwards, yes, indeed.
Right. But at this stage, what was he exactly? He was the
Olympic champion.
The Olympic champion swimmer.
Holder, yes.
He was the first of his day arriving into Dublin Zoo to swim up and down with the seals.
But I must just mention one thing to you, which I think is very important.
Yeah.
Jack Sweeney, who was, of course, Ronnie Delaney's coach, and Bill Hyland, who was the director of publicity for Nestle, which were the supporters of the Tailteann Games now. They continue, but as a schools interprovincial, they decided that they would like to get Harold Osborne and Larry Stanley together again.
Right.
On the 50th anniversary, and they succeeded.
Really?
And now Dr. Osborne and Inspector Larry Stanley from the Dublin Metropolitan Guard, of course, arrived on the very spot in Croke Park where the great high jump took place in 1924, 50 years later.
How wonderful. How wonderful.
And I saw them, and so did my father. And he had seen the original, and it was a great...
That must have been an amazing moment.
Marvellous for me to be with my father and see these two men that I'd heard about all my life, and my father saw them when they were young fellas 50 years before, jumping on that very spot.
At the peak of their powers.
Absolutely.
Did it fulfil what they were hoping to do? Did it go around the world? Did it get well reported?
Yes, it did. It got quite well reported in Irish areas, but it got very well reported in diplomatic areas. In fact, there was one very interesting diplomatic situation. The British diplomats, of course, were invited and were there. And John Devoy actually came back from America for the 24 Tailteann. And the British diplomats couldn't believe, it's this fellow causes all that trouble in the 1880s. He's back again, and so on. And you can thank J.J. Keane for getting them all. How he got them here. He got 7 Olympic champions, incidentally.
Really?
To compete, yes, and many Olympians.
It really was a success. It carried on, didn't
and
it?
it made, incidentally, it made a profit.
Which is very worth...
Well, the government were delighted because they obviously didn't want to put the money out, but they did. And
we were broke at the time, weren't we?
Well, we hadn't very much. But the point was, this was something that gave us a great concentration on Ireland and things Irish and coming here. Unfortunately, and it did very well economically. I mean, the city was had all kinds of banners and all things going up. But unfortunately, it came a cropper with the Congress in 1932.
I was wondering about this. It went on again in 28 and 32.
Yes.
It was actually clashing with the Olympics each year, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't clashing. The point was, it always took place after the Olympics, and that's how we got Olympic
athletes. It was in the same year, though, wasn't it?
It was the same year, right?
Yeah.
But that's how we got Olympic
Right, because they were around.
It just came afterwards, yes.
Yeah.
the trouble in 32 was held in Olympics was held in Los Angeles, and the teams that would have been in Europe, like the Americans and Australians, were not there. So we didn't get those, and of course it clashed with the Congress, which took place 3 weeks before. And you can't have two things.
And that was the end of it.
And that was the end of it. The other reason why it went out of business was because the NACA, which was the national governing body, were suspended by the IAAF because of a new rule on membership. And that means nobody from outside the country could come.
All right. It sounds like a sadly forgotten episode in our history. Was it filmed? Is there footage of it?
Yes, I've seen footage of it. I've seen Pat O'Callaghan throw the hammer in Croke Park. And in fact, my father took me to Croke Park. It must have been, I said, well, it was in 1938.
Yeah.
And I saw Pat O'Callaghan throw the hammer there. In fact, I thought it was great, but I didn't know who he was. But he actually won the Olympic title, and he came back and won the Talting title.
Very impressive. One of our listeners thinks he can remember them. He's asking, when was the last Talton Games? That would have been 32, would it?
32 for the senior one, but the last one took place a month ago, actually, in Santry.
Yes, it's only a month ago. That's why you remember
the school's Talteen.
All right.
And I was the starter. And incidentally, I have it here. I must show you the Talteen medal that I was awarded for my activities. This is based on the 1932 one.
That's
gold
beautiful.
medal, as you can
that
see.
is absolutely beautiful
medal?
Yeah. That's Queen Talton on the front of it?
Yes.
It's about, what's it, about 2.5 inches wide, and this
something like that.
A reproduction of the Queen, a handsome woman.
Very handsome.
Maybe say. It really is amazing, isn't it?
Yes, indeed.
Talton Ideal Award to Dr. Cyril White, 17th November 2001, ISAA. How wonderful. You've other stuff too. What's the other stuff that you have there?
Well, I've written a good bit on the Talton, and this is Keane himself, as you can see, very
wonderful
distinguished looking man, Ireland's first member of the International Olympic Committee, and the 112th member of the IOC.
He looks every inch of it.
Oh, he does indeed. And the article I've written, which is based on actually the 24 games, I've entitled it The Talteen Games, a cultural and sporting expression of Irish identities. And that's exactly what the games did. It brought people with different views about Irishness. The Unionists, the Nationalists, the Republicans, the Catholics, the Protestants, the Northerners, the Southerners, the athletes, the supporters, the officials, and you name it. And they all came together behind Larry Stanley against Harold Osborne. And Harold Osborne told me that himself and showed me his Talteen medal that he'd won.
How wonderful.
And he said that particular high jump competition in Croke Park was the toughest competition he had that year. He said the Olympic competition was easy in comparison to competing against Larry Stanley.
How wonderful. The gathering is on next year. They're gathering people from all over the world with Irish connections. I wonder if it might be a good time to bring the Talton Games.
Why not?
Yes.
Why not?
And you to be at the front of it. Cyril,
well, I don't know about the front, but I'd be there.
Somewhere in there. Cyril White, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Very illuminating. An absolute pleasure talking to you.
My pleasure. Thank you.